Hey everyone, welcome. Today we're cracking open a case file that's, well, supposed to be cold, but it's anything but. We're going to be investigating CVE 2008-0015. Yeah, a vulnerability that's over a decade old, but somehow it's still considered a major active threat. So, let's start digging.
All right, before we jump in, I just want to give a quick but important shout out. All the information, all the data we're about to go through, it all comes from the fantastic research done by NURICAPS over on YouTube.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll try to get our heads around this weirdly persistent bug. Then we'll get technical and deconstruct how it actually works. After that, we'll look at the hard data to gauge the real threat level, check out the evidence for exploits out in the wild, and finally, we'll connect all the dots to figure out why this old bug is still such a big deal today.
Okay, let's get right to the heart of the mystery. We're talking about a bug from 2008. I mean, in the world of cybersecurity, that's practically ancient history. So the real question is, why on earth are we still talking about it now?
And this is really the core of our whole investigation, isn't it? How can something so old, something that's been public knowledge for so long, still be a serious danger? To get to the bottom of that, we have to start by taking the bug apart, piece by piece.
To really solve this thing, we need to roll up our sleeves and get into the technical details. Examine the bug's anatomy. Understanding exactly how it works is the key to figuring out why it's so stubborn and, frankly, so dangerous. Let's get into the forensics.
At its core, CVE 2008-0015 is what we call a classic stack-based buffer overflow. Now, the concept is actually pretty simple. Just imagine trying to pour a whole gallon of water into a tiny coffee cup. What happens? It overflows and makes a huge mess. Well, in software, that mess can actually overwrite really important instructions, which lets an attacker sneak in and run their own malicious code.
Our investigation leads us to one specific spot. The weak point, the Achilles heel, is a function called CCOM variant read from stream. Think of this as the leaky pipe or the unlocked door that attackers have found and can just waltz right through.
You see, this vulnerability exists because of a very specific chain of components. The flawed function is part of the active template library, which you'll see called ATL. It gets used by something called the mpgtune request active control, which itself is located inside a file named msvidctl.dll. It's the combination of all these pieces that creates the perfect storm for an exploit.
In fact, this whole case has an official name. It's known as the Microsoft Video ActiveX Control Vulnerability. And that name points us directly at the technology it takes advantage of, a piece of software that was designed to handle video streams way back in older versions of Windows.
All right, so we know what the bug is and where it's hiding. Now let's actually try to quantify the danger. It's time to look at the numbers and see just how bad this threat really is, according to the standard systems everyone uses.
And the first piece of evidence is the CVSS base score. This thing is rated an 8.8 out of 10. And that lands it squarely in the high severity category. So yeah, we're not talking about some minor bug here. This is a genuinely critical flaw.
This big long string here, the vector string, it gives us the juicy details. Let's just focus on one part, AVN. That stands for Attack Vector Network. What that means is an attacker doesn't need to be sitting at your computer. They can launch an attack right over the internet, usually just by tricking someone into visiting a malicious website. And that makes it incredibly easy to exploit on a massive scale.
Okay, now for the Exploit Prediction Scoring System, or EPSS. This score tells us the probability that this thing will be exploited in the next 30 days. And for our little bug from 2008, that probability is over 80%. That is shockingly high. This isn't just a theoretical threat, it's a highly probable one, even right now.
So, the numbers are definitely painting a pretty grim picture. But what's the actual evidence on the ground? Let's switch gears and look at the exploit landscape to see if we can find proof that attackers actually have the tools to pull this off.
Now this is where it gets really interesting. If you go looking on GitHub for public exploits for this, you'll come up empty, nothing. But if you check a more specialized place like ExploitDB, boom, a totally different story. There are multiple proof of concepts, or POCs, just sitting there.
And if you look at the dates here, you can see that the blueprints for an attack are not new. We've got proof of concepts published way back in 2009 and 2010. The instruction manual on how to exploit this thing has been publicly available for well over a decade. So let's recap. We have an old, very well-documented vulnerability with a high severity score and public exploit code.
All of this leads us to our final, most important question. Why does any of this matter right now? Well, the answer is on a very, very important list.
And there it is. This is the single most important piece of evidence that makes this case red hot today. CVE 2008-0015 is officially listed in the CISA Known Exploited Vulnerabilities catalog. This is the smoking gun.
Being on the CISA KEV catalog means one simple thing. This isn't just a potential threat. It means there is solid evidence that this vulnerability is being actively and repeatedly used by attackers in the real world, right now. This isn't some dusty historical archive. It's a current events bulletin of threats that U.S. federal agencies are legally required to patch immediately. That's how serious it is.
And that brings our investigation to a close, but it leaves us with one last, kind of unsettling question. The case of CVE 2008-0015 proves that in cybersecurity, old definitely does not mean safe. So it makes you wonder, how many other forgotten bugs like this one are still hiding in our systems, just waiting for their moment?
Hey, if you found this deep dive helpful for understanding this crazy, persistent threat, do me a favor and hit that subscribe and like button. Your support really is what allows us to keep digging into these cases and creating more content just like this. Thanks for watching.